Good morning, and welcome to this sacred time together in this sacred place. Whether you call the United Church of Gainesville your church home, or you are a visitor for the first or of many times, you are welcome here, just as you are, and we are so honored that you have joined us this morning as we celebrate the life of Ruth Morris Keitt. My name is Talia Raymond. I am one of the ministers here at the United Church of Gainesville, and I'll be joined in the leading of this service this morning with the Reverend Sandy Reimer, who is a minister emeritus of our church and who will be able to share a perspective on Ruth that as a newcomer I was not blessed to have. For those of you who are not UCG members, so that you aren't lost in a bit, I want to point out that our opening hymn will be found in the black hymnal on page 433. And later, in between the poems, we will sing a response that you'll find in the back of this book, our UCG songbook. It is important that we gather as a church family to celebrate our joys and to mourn our losses, to hold space for one another in our collective grief. My prayer is that this will be a time and celebration of thanksgiving for one who gave so much to our United Church of Gainesville and to all of us as individuals. We'll take the time as beloved community to hear one another's stories and raise our voices in song, poem, and prayer, in celebration and blessing. Ruth preached a few times right here from this pulpit, and in one of those sermons in 1994, entitled A Passion Story for the Earth, she closed that sermon with this story. I leave you with an image that I have carried for years. On a trip to Rome, I remember standing before Michelangelo's Pietà, depicting Mary holding Jesus after he had been taken down from the cross. I was deeply moved by Mary's position, her left hand outstretched, unable to soothe her son's body, which lies across her knees. More than her hands, her face bears her grief with an arresting sense of absolute and total presence. The kind of presence that heals because it does not retreat in the face of intense feeling, but offers itself totally. Let this be a place today where we can offer ourselves totally. For here we gather in the protective shelter of healing love. We are free to pour out our grief, release our anger, face our emptiness, and know that we are not alone. We are here to comfort and support each other in our common loss. We gather to hear words of hope that can drive away despair and move us to gratitude. Will you join me in a moment of prayer? Holy One, whose ways are not our ways, and whose thoughts are not our thoughts, grant that your Spirit may intercede for us with sighs too deep for human words. Heal our wounded hearts made heavy by our sorrow. Through the veil of our tears and silence of our grief, assure us again that ear has not heard, nor eye seen, nor human imagination envisioned what you have prepared for those who follow the ways of love. Amen. Will you rise as you are able in body or in spirit and sing with me our opening song, number 433 in the black hymnal. In the Please be seated. It's my honor to invite Alan to come forward and share a reading and perhaps an anecdote. Move this back since you don't need the height. Yes.
Good morning. I'm so glad to see you all. I would point out for you Ruth's ashes here in an urn made by her nephew, who's a supreme metal worker. She's with us there. I'd also start with a little anecdote. Where I live at the village, at the first floor of my residential home, there's a table where people put out discarded objects. I noted one time a book called The Story Bible, and it was written by Pearl S. Buck. Those of my generation will remember her. She's not well known now. And it was a translation of the entire Old and New Testament in the language of today. I thought, well, this is interesting. I'll pick it up. Someone has left it here to be taken. So I opened it up, put my finger down, and this is what I found. This is the King James Version of the Book of Ruth that I'm reading today. Out of 594 pages and 72 stories of the Old and New Testament, that's where my finger lay. And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest I will go, and where thou lodgest I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if even death part thee and me." I think we're going to sing.
A poem by Wendell Berry. Within the circles of our lives, we dance the circles of the years, the circles of the seasons within the circles of the years. Again we come and go, changing and changing. Hands join, unjoin in love and fear, grief and joy, each by all the others held. In the hold of hands and eyes we turn in pairs, that joining each to all again, and then we turn aside, alone, out of the sunlight, gone into the darker circles of return. Will you sing? Philip will play it through once for us.
A poem by Mary Oliver. So I thought, maybe death is in darkness after all, but so much light, wrapping itself around us as soft as feathers, that we are instantly weary of looking and looking, and shutting our eyes not without amazement, and we let ourselves be carried as through the translucence of mica to the river that is without the least dapple or shadow, that is nothing but light, scalding aortal light, in which we are washed and washed out of our bones.
Each of us speaking this morning shared in a part of the book of Ruth. I only knew her for the last few chapters, but I am certainly no less blessed to have been met with the radiance of her smile and the peaceful wisdom of her presence. I met Ruth as I meet most church folk, standing at the open doors after a service. I remember fondly each Sunday the gentle squeeze of my hand in hers. That smile that was so bright and the eyes sparkling that drew you right in. And of course, always by her side, the steady, loving presence of Alan. In the very short time that I got to share being a member of the UCG choir with Ruth, her joy in rehearsals was always so palpable. She had this divine hum that would filter through the quiet spaces, as if the music was always ringing in her soul. Hearing that sweet humming reminded me always of what music is supposed to do: bring people together, build community, and light us up with the joy of sharing it with beloved ones. It has been an honor to be reintroduced to Ruth through the eyes of those who had the deep blessing of walking with her through so many more chapters of her life. Her life story has been penned and published and has been crafted with such care and devotion by Alan in the slideshow that you will see in Reimer Hall concluding the service. So instead of sharing facts about Ruth, I'd like to share something different this morning. More of the gift of Ruth's words. This time from a sermon that she preached in 1998, and our closing song is from that same service. In this sermon, she detailed coming to coexist with the uncomfortable heat of Florida summers. She wrote, "This relationship with a landscape, at one time so strange, has ripened over time to become an intimate connection with the sacredness of the earth herself. I loved the celebratory language of the Rumi poem," and she noted that Ann Gill read it in that service. I saw you here today somewhere. There you are, Ann. When Rumi speaks of the sun about which nothing can be said, he touches the edge of language, using the sun as a symbol of the radiant mystery and wonder of the sacred one. This week, while writing my sermon, I have been alone. Alan is kayaking with friends in Alaska. I have been in the rhythm of summer, sitting under the wish of a paddle fan, hearing the frogs, singing in the stillness before the rain, listening hopefully for the thunder, sleeping on the screened-in porch, taking walks down the sandy road or working in my herb garden. The sweat runs down between my shoulder blades and I feel at peace. So where is the summer's sacred wisdom in all of this? I will propose that as we fully open to the difficult places in our lives, we find the resources within ourselves that we didn't know existed. Ministers tend to tuck a call and a blessing into the ends of their sermons, and Ruth was no different. At the end of this sermon, she wrote, "So sacred wisdom comes to us as daily invitation to either move into difficult issues of our lives or to look the other way. The Christ story is the great metaphor for our Western culture of life, death and resurrection, reminding us that healing comes only after encountering the inevitable changes of our lives. So today or tomorrow, as life presents its next challenge, let yourself respond to the question, what shall I do in the heat of this moment of my life?" It strikes me that Ruth knew just what to do: to love deeply, to create beauty, to greet new ministers with compassion, to speak and to hum wisdom into the silence, and to not shy away from sharing blessings with others. Truly, in her words and presence today, we know that even death cannot separate us from Ruth. In 1994, UCG celebrated its 50th anniversary. and this book of writings by members was created. Ruth's short piece in this book speaks of two words, of nudge and of nurture, of her deep spiritual nature and her more than capable leadership. And it serves as a great introduction to Reverend Sandy Reimer's sharing. Larry and Sandy, through their ministry at UCG, have taught me that leadership can truly be a partnership. They have also taught me that ministry is about nudge and nurture. Let me explain. For many words, I felt out of place and disconnected in relation to church. Although my spiritual life felt deep and rich, it remained hidden for lack of community. During my years as a member of UCG, they have nudged me and nurtured me to find expression for my spiritual self and my leader self. The fact is, I have done things at UCG that shy people just do not do. And aren't we the better for it and the more blessed for it? Reverend Sandy Reimer will come now to share as Minister Emeritus, who knew Ruth as a leader and a creator here at UCG. And she will share more about this chapter of nudge and nurture in their lives together.
I first met Ruth in the mid-1980s. She had completed her master's in social work through a Florida State University program located here in Gainesville, and she had opened her practice as a family and children's therapist at Breakthrough Counseling Center, where she would work for the next 20 years, touching the lives of so many children and families and parents. At that time, I was in my 40s, working as the program director here at UCG. Ruth became part of my life, a mentor, a dream sharer, a spiritual companion, a supporter, a good friend. She had a remarkable capacity for listening and for sharing, both of which enriched her friendships as well as her work. I remember her empathy and her nurturing when I would share something with her about a concern that I had in my life. And at the same time, Ruth would offer her candid feedback, nudging me along just a little, often with a pithy, dry wit. Her wit was regularly precise and right on the mark. That wonderful two-step of nurture and nudge, which Talia mentioned, was a through line in Ruth's life. And who can possibly forget her contagious laughter and her twinkling eyes? Ruth was 7 years older than me, so she had already experienced the transitions I was navigating in my 40s and my 50s. The mother of 3 sons, Ruth was especially helpful and understanding as I was mothering my 2 sons. As I turned 50, Ruth was my cheerleader, sharing her own experiences that new decade was a time of expansive energy, a time of both grounding and adventure, and yes, a powerful time of self-realization and wisdom for women. On my 50th birthday, Ruth led a croning ceremony for me, and she drew on a large poster a purple triangle with a broad, strong base, and out of it a bright flame emerged. She placed crayons next to the poster so that everyone there could pick a color of a crayon to add to that flame, a color they felt represented my spirit soaring over the next years ahead. I still have that poster. It is just one example of Ruth's creativity which she expressed in art, in music, in singing, in her flowers, in her home, in yoga and meditation, and in her general way of greeting and dealing with life. She had fresh ways of insight, of managing things and reframing things, ways of celebrating, ways that always led to a sense of harmony and of balance. Ruth's commitment to the important issues she believed in, the environment, the earth, equity and justice, inclusion, children's safety and growth, and women's rights. These were firm foundations of her character and of her faith. And when she wrote about being nudged and nurtured to find expression for her spiritual self, she identified what I believe are the two essential components of a spiritual journey: finding a sense of faith that brings both comfort and challenge. My call to ordained ministry was also growing at the same time, and Ruth was there for me, encouraging me to take each next step. Alan and Ruth officially joined this church as active participants in 1988. And Ruth particularly worked with and later chaired the committee in this church that helps with worship, an arena in which her spiritual and creative vision were profound gifts. In addition to assisting on Sunday morning services and preaching from time to time, Ruth and Alan also gave this church the gift of hospitality in their beautiful home and land in Williston. They hosted workshops and meditation groups and even led outside solstice and equinox celebrations, complete with drums and singing and bonfires. Ruth's indelible impact on the life of this congregation and all of us survives to this day. In the fall of 1990, and the spring of 1991, at the very same time we were building this sanctuary, we convened a task force and charged that task force with increasing our congregation's awareness, understanding, and affirmation of LGBTQ people. Ruth served on that task force and helped to plan a year-long program of learning and understanding through sermons, seminars, panel discussions, small groups, and age-appropriate programs for our children and for our youth. Now, in those years, this was pretty much a groundbreaking endeavor, as almost all churches were either ignoring these issues or splitting apart over them. In 1991, Ruth was elected as the moderator of UCG, and under her undaunted leadership, our congregation prepared to declare ourselves an open and affirming congregation in our denomination, a church that welcomed all people, including sexual orientation, into every aspect of our church's life and governance. Ruth steered us through a process of consensus, and then, along with Fonda Eiler, who followed her as moderator, through the official vote in June of 1992, when by an overwhelming majority we became an open and affirming congregation. That decision has enriched and continues to enrich our church beyond all measure. And Ruth's commitment to inclusion, her nurturing of process, and her carefully grounded nudging were instrumental and essential to this outcome. In the summer of 2002, Ruth and Alan moved to Vermont to be part of the Cobb Hill co-housing community. And Ruth and I stayed in touch with one another over the years. And when I was at last ordained as a minister, I was so grateful for her support even from afar. And I knew that she was clearly with me in spirit on that special day. As the Irish poet John O'Donoghue reminds us, let us look for Ruth not only in memory, but let us find her presence with us. And that is how I think of Ruth, now and always. She is with me in spirit, as close as my breath.
Invite Andrew to come forward and share. Yeah, we'll bring that.
Ruth was my mother, and so I knew her as my mother. All of you knew her as something else. You were all familiar with probably therapist Ruth and artist Ruth, and organic gardener Ruth, but probably you're not familiar with smoking hot debutante Ruth. My mother was a smoking hot debutante in New York City. This is her coming out at the Junior League Ball in 1952. And when I say smoking hot, I mean smoking hot. When I say smoking, I mean smoking. Like she smoked cigarettes. And I don't know why I find that so fascinating, that image of her. I often imagine her just strolling down Park Avenue, smoking a cigarette. I don't know if she ever did that, but that image fascinates me. And I think it's because no matter how close you are to somebody, there's a whole aspect of them that you never know, right? And none of us knew smoking hot debutante Ruth. I just knew her as my mother, and I gestated in her womb for 9 months, so it's hard to get closer to someone than that. But yet, and just being here today and hearing these stories, I realize how much of her I didn't know. I knew her as a mother, and she was a very, very good mother. Much better than I deserved. And I'll tell you a brief anecdote to illustrate this point. In the spring of 1987, I was fast asleep in a tiny room in a cluttered apartment in Madrid. Honestly, it might have been early afternoon. I kept very odd hours in those days, but there I was, sound asleep, when the phone rang. And I kind of wobbled to the phone and picked it up, and on the other end, a voice said, "Andrew, this is your mother. I'm at the airport." So my mother had come to visit me in Madrid, and somehow I had forgotten to mark my calendar. I don't even think I had a calendar. But, I mean, who does that? Who does that? If there was ever an incident that I deserved to have hung over my head for all eternity, right, and to be made to feel guilty about, that was it. But Ruth was not one to hold a grudge. And we went on to have a wonderful journey together. This was a picture that I took on a day trip to Toledo. I love that picture. And later that day, when we returned from Toledo, we went back to Madrid, and we had a big party in the aforementioned cramped Madrid apartment. And the place was full of crazy Spaniards drinking and carrying on, and Ruth didn't speak any Spanish, but I still remember her just beaming, having a great time, and because Ruth was unflappable. She was open to experience. I think is a psychologically correct term. And if there are any of Ruth's erstwhile therapy colleagues in the audience, you know what I'm talking about. But I could think of many other anecdotes to illustrate this. But Ruth took everything in stride. And I took it for granted at the time, but thinking back on it, it was really remarkable. And so we left Madrid and we drove to Geneva. I had a summer job waiting for me in Geneva. And we had the most remarkable trip. We drove and spent our first night in San Sebastian on the northern coast of Spain, and then crossed the Pyrenees into the south of France, and we stayed in a random guest house somewhere in the south of France, and had, I remember, an exquisite meal, the kind of cuisine that you only get at random guest houses in the south of France, I guess, and then on to Geneva. And I remember this day so clearly. We took a little cruise out on Lake Geneva, and we cruised out past the wonderful fountain that is at the mouth of the harbor of the lake, and out into the deep, crystal clear blue waters of the lake with the Alps towering on the banks. And we talked and talked, and I don't remember what we talked about, and I don't even remember what it was that she said to me, but I just remember standing back and thinking, you know, my mother is truly wise. She was really wise. And I think that's the ultimate tribute, right, that you can give to a parent. And I benefited from this wisdom in so many ways as her son. She, in fact, the reason I had that summer job in Geneva was that she had nudged me. I'd never heard this writing of hers, or the nudge and nurture, but she nudged and nurtured. And I remember being at kind of loose ends and not knowing what to do with myself, as was often the case in my youth. And she said, you know, I heard of someone, a friend of mine, who got a job at a summer camp in Switzerland. And that was all she said. Because when she nudged and nurtured, it was never overbearing. She never browbeat you or guilt-tripped you. That was all it took. And so, and I have to say, to this day, I remain in awe of that, because I'm a parent now, and I browbeat and guilt-trip from dawn to dusk, right? That's my MO, but she never did that. And I realize again, you know, how remarkable that was. But she said, you know, why don't you check out this opportunity? So I did. I went to Geneva and I worked at the summer camp, and I'd planned to stay three months in Europe. But one thing led to another. I ended up in Madrid. I stayed for 3 years, and ultimately I became a historian of Spain, which has been my career. And that was just that one nudge. I mean, so much of my life I owe to just her, nudges and nurtures. And I know this was true of my brothers as well. So I was very, very fortunate to have Ruth for a mother. And, but as I said at the beginning, as close as you are to someone, you don't know the whole story. You never know the whole story. Ruth was multifaceted, as are we all. And so maybe Walt Whitman was on the right track when he said that we contain multitudes, but the self's not a container. It doesn't contain anything, but it reflects. It reflects everything, and that's why I love this picture so much of her. I think Ruth was especially reflective, and I love this glimmering, these reflections and refractions of the sun off of her body. And I should also note that her husband, Alan, was, as a photographer, was always very gifted at catching the light. And so, yeah, all of the reflections of the facets of ourselves are caught. I mean, everyone in this room caught a facet of Ruth, and she caught a facet of you, and so on and so forth. Or again, to risk mixing my metaphors, you know, as Talia had spoke of the book of Ruth, you know, everyone in this room, and not just in, had a page or a chapter or section. And so this gathering feels especially powerful to me for precisely that reason, that because of all of these small little facets of her that are gathered here, not only just in this room in person, but online, and there are other people here watching, and it feels very gratifying to me. It feels very powerful. It feels like more than the sum of its parts to see Ruth celebrated in this way, and I'm so grateful to all of you for being here. But of course, you can talk in metaphor all you want, but the truth is, of course, that the pain that you feel with someone's passing is inversely proportional to the distance that you have from them. The closer you are, the greater the pain. But I think that her family, I think we all can feel some consolation in the fact that there was nothing left undone or unsaid. And Ruth was a wise woman who lived well and loved well, and I think that's something that we can all live with.
Kind of don't want to put up the screen. I think we should just leave her there. What do you think? Friends and family, thank you for being here today to celebrate the Book of Ruth. Words shared today could never fully encompass all that Ruth was or begin to describe what she meant to the lives that she touched. They can, however, stir in us blessed memories of one loved so deeply and so profoundly grateful for the time we shared together. Alan chose the following poem as it speaks to the life of Ruth and the one that she lived so well. And as Alan has said several times this week, what would Ruth do? When I die, if you need to weep, cry for your brother or sister walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved.
And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give it away.
And as we leave this place of sanctuary, we remember that Ruth has found eternal sanctuary. May light perpetual shine upon her. Please join us in prayer as we lift up these words of blessing and of farewell.
Into your hands, O God of love, we commend your beloved, Ruth Morris Keitt. We are thankful for her life, for the grace that Ruth was to us, grace both fragile and strong.
Acknowledge, we humbly pray, a sheep of your own fold, a lamb of your own flock, and a daughter of your own grace and wisdom. Receive her into the arms of your mercy, into the blessed rest of everlasting peace, and into the company of the saints of light. Amen. We will close in song. As I mentioned, this hymn is a Paul Winter hymn with the words by poet Kim Oller. It's part of the Earth Mass, or Missa Gaia, and Ruth selected this to now.